what is a monster? A monster is a being that exists within the constructs of evil, within the framework of Anne Rice's monsters. Monsters exist both as a force of evil and both as a gradation of evil. Armand justifies a lot of the things he does because he subscribes to this worldview that his self-interest is paramount and must come first. Are the vampires within Anne Rice's universe evil? This conversation was started by Playing with Bisi, who made a video on Armand. The video tries to explain the lies that Armand tells and raises the question of whether or not Armand is a manipulator or a liar. I want to share my thoughts on that. I'm going to preface my opinion with this. Anne Rice's interview with a vampire is a deeply profound philosophical piece of work. I personally, outside of the literary texts that I read or read in college, I personally have not come across a fictional, entertaining world building around vampires that is just this profound in philosophical context. And one of the philosophical topics that Anne Rice discusses throughout her Vampire Chronicles is the philosophical issue of morality, and to her that forms the basis of the monsters within her universe. I particularly love that she pivots from the traditional genre category of evil and she challenges the notion of what it means to be evil. To Anne Rice, her monsters, or the structure for developing her monsters and the archetypes that she creates within or invents within her literature, is whether or not a vampire comes close to being human or very far from being human. And I don't mean this in a positive sense of, coming close to humanity. I'm talking about coming close to the monstrosity that is within humans. When you pick the characters one after the other, you either see a reflection of the most heinous aspects of humanity in a monster, or you see the humane aspect of humanity in a monster. And so this dichotomy and binary runs within the Vampire Chronicles and the universe of monsters that Anne Rice builds. Now, to talk about the philosophical debates, to dissect and analyze the philosophical aspects of her book in terms of what makes a monster and what doesn't make a monster a monster, I would like to quickly touch on some of the philosophical theories about morality or evil that to me underscores all the characters of the monsters that Anne Rice develops in her story. Now, quick disclaimer, I am not a student of philosophy. I did study philosophy for a semester in school, in college, and that was it. But I did, study enough about certain topics that I feel confident enough to talk about them. The genius of Anne Rice is reflected in the way that every monster you see in the Vampire Chronicles represents a particular school of thought within philosophical discourse. You take the character of Louis. Of course, I love to talk about Louis, but I'll try to stay on topic in this particular podcast. Louis is a Manichaean through and through. When you look at the theory of, the Manichaean theory of evil, you see this reflected in the ideology and worldview of Louis, most in the show and in the books as well. The Manichaean theory of evil or morality is premised on the idea that there's a dual nature to evil. Evil is something that is outside of the human body. It's something that humans do not, in simple terms, control. And so evil becomes a clash of forces between good and bad. And whoever is evil is whoever allows these forces to dominate or just overcome and overwhelm them. When you look at Louis is one person who sees evil as something that is outside of him. He has that dualistic point of view where he sees a binary between good and evil, and there are no gray areas. And this is particularly seen in the episode where he and Armand in season 2 of Interview with the Vampire, when he and Armand are in this coffee shop and they're having a conversation about the gradations to evil, and Armand says to him that there are gradations to evil, and Louis does not believe that evil can have gradations. You're either born good or you're bad. And if that is the case, and evil has a dualistic nature, or there are evil forces and good forces that are constantly at war within every individual, and whether a person is good or bad depends on which force wins within them, then the cure to being, or the solution to being evil, would have to be relying on certain like strict rituals, rituals such as abstinence, for example, or just denying yourself certain things in order to nurture the good that is within you. And so when you take a character like Louis, you see him, adhering to these strict ritualistic practices, where he's abstaining from drinking blood, he's abstaining from killing human beings. He leans on these rituals to him to nurture the good within him, because he believes in order to be good, he needs to suppress the evil force that lies within him. This, of course, conflicts with the worldview and philosophy of all the other vampires within the Anne Rice's universe, both in the show and in the books as well. And you can see I do not want to go in depth about every character's philosophical worldview. I could do that in a separate podcast or video. If you want that, you let me know. When you take the character of Armand is a Kantian by nature, and he subscribes to the philosophical views of Kant, and he believes that whether a person is good or evil depends on whether a person has a stronger will or propensity towards choosing whatever serves their interest the most, So evil, good and bad comes down to the choices that we make, and that is the Kantians, in very broad, generalized, simplistic terms, that is the Kantian perspective of evil. Honorable mentions would be a character like Lestat. Lestat would be a Nietzschean philosophist, or he would subscribe to the Nietzschean aesthetic view of morality or of evil. A character like Marius, of course, would be a humanist philosopher, or he would be a symbol for the humanist, stewardship type of theory or morality. And then Claudia actually fits in different categories of, and I would really love to talk about or make a separate video about Claudia's philosophy on evil. And to me, I would say for now that she exhibits similar traits as Lestat. She is Lestat's daughter, and so her philosophical view on morality and evil tends to be Nietzschean in nature. So now back to the main topic of discussion, which is whether or not Armand is a manipulator or a liar. Now, I just see Armand as neither of these things. Honestly, yes, he does them, and yes, we can articulate what he does and says as manipulation or lies, but it is not who he is. Who he is just a self-serving son of a bitch. He is, and according to the show, when you read the books, he's more complex than that. I wouldn't say Armand is complicated. I'd say he's more complex than that. But at least the show simplifies him, because every character becomes a symbol of a philosophical ideology. And for Armand, his ideology is very Kantian in nature. So I'll go a little bit into what Kant means by evil is just a matter of the will within a person. For you to be seen as evil, you must prioritize your self-interest above others. Then that makes you either more evil or less evil. So that becomes that gradation that Armand talks about in season 2 of the Interview with a Vampire. He's not evil or a manipulator. His worldview simply conflicts with other characters. And again, these are monsters we are talking about here. As monsters, their very nature comes to play. Dictionary would define evil as, doing that which hurts another person or intentionally causing harm to another person. I would say within the Anne Rice's universe that evil just doesn't exist within that world at all. Because to say that a monster is good is just quite ironic and oxymoronic. As monsters, they are all predisposed and susceptible to predation. It is this predatory nature that makes them monsters, at least from a human's perspective. It's neither good or bad, it's just self-conceited. His love is both possessive and obsessive, and he withholds just as much as Louis withholds in his relationship with Lestat. The difference here is Armand is not withholding affection, and that's what Louis sees as manipulation and lies. He's simply withholding his commitment. He's withholding his loyalty. He's withholding his protection. He's withholding his trust as well. He's not just going to hand them over to Louis as Louis expects him to. Why should he? If Louis wants all those things, according to Armand or per Armand's philosophical view, Louis would have to earn them. And so he tells this to Louis when they're having that conversation after Louis just burns the theater down. He tells Louis that it was his covering of 100 years and he just couldn't count on Louis' love as long. In his own weird, twisted, fucked up way, what Armand is trying to say here is you need to earn my loyalty. You need to earn all these things that you want from me. Yeah, you have not given me enough for me to trust you. You've not given me enough for me to pour myself into you this way. And so when you look at it that way, it becomes a story about two individuals, yeah, that are both withholding what the other needs from the other. They are withholding from each other. Armand is not Lestat. Lestat gives and he gives and he gives and he overwhelms you because he's giving to you to get something out of you. He is showering you with affection and love bombing you so you do not abandon him. To him, love is a means to an end. Armand is simply the opposite of that. It doesn't make him necessarily a monster when we think about the idea or the concept of gradation or there being like a gradient to evil and morality. To Armand, his choices are very valid because they are steeped again in his own desires, and nobody's going to make him feel guilty about the things he wants and the things he desires. He's not lying, he is just being honest with himself, which most of the vampires within the vampire, chronicles don't do. Louis is lying to himself, Lestat is lying to himself, Claudia is lying to herself. Nobody's standing in their truth. Armand stands in his truth, and he does so unapologetically. In a grand scheme of things, I wouldn't say Armand is a monster enough. He is a monster. He's just not the worst of the monsters. But of course, if we do want to see him and analyze him through a human lens, then let's tear him apart. That'll be all for today. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I am looking for more people to have these conversations with. I'm bored, I'm home. Let me know what your thoughts are, and yeah, do like this video and do subscribe to this channel because I guess it's a channel now. See you in the next video. Bye.